The pictures are seared into our memories. Pictures of the bodies, the ovens, the concentration camps, the emaciated survivors. Tonight, we hear their stories. Frida Jaffe was only 2 years old when the Germans invaded Poland. She grew up in Lutotov and is still haunted by what happened in 1942, a few years later.
The biggest thing that will not leave me is the one day when the door was broken down into our residence and soldiers, guards, uniform, rifles, big noise, and my father was ill. He was in bed and he was dragged out of the room. He was arrested. I can't tell you what my thought was, except that we were all screaming.
Her father, a chemist, was arrested because he would not work for the Germans. The next time she saw him was a few days later after being called to the town square. Gallows had been set up.
I remember seeing the gallows, and everybody was scared and fearful, and we didn't know. But then appeared my father with two other men, blindfolded, their arms tied, very well beaten, and I can remember him being forced down on the ground, on the square. There were, from my memory bank, very sharp stones, and on his knees, and the other two men as well, they had to crawl on their knees to the gallows. So I remember the trail of blood. I remember the horror of that and how beaten he was.
Her father, Joseph Geltzman, was hanged in front of her.
My mother tried to put her hand in front of my eyes, and her hand was knocked away. And what I recall, the soldier, the guard, the Nazi, perhaps he was even a Polish policeman, I don't know, someone in uniform, knocked her hand away and said something to the effect, "No, she has to watch and she has to learn." And I learned a lot that day.
Months later, a roundup of Jews. Frida remembers the moment her mother's name was called out for deportation to Treblinka.
I had wandered away and crawling through legs, and I heard that, so I knew that was her, that was me also. And I'm running, and I'm trying to get through the legs, screaming, "Mama, Mama, Mama," and someone grabbing me, shoving me behind them on the ground and putting a hand on my mouth. Later found out it was my Aunt Gucha, my mother's sister.
Her mother, never acknowledging her screams, was taken to Treblinka, holding Frida's baby brother in her arms. They were exterminated there.
The strength of this woman to not acknowledge me, to not turn around, to not say, "Fredja, come," and just continue to walk, because I'm quite sure she knew that if she turned and acknowledged me and I would be with her, that we would all be gone.
A few months later, Frida, living alone with a family friend, was herself rounded up and eventually sent to Bergen-Belsen.
I just remember piles of corpses, not small piles, much taller, just naked, some limbless corpses all over in that small area. But my favorite time was watching a whole troop of lice that was burrowing in my rib cage and watching them eating away my flesh. It was absolutely fascinating.
In all, 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. It's estimated 1 million of them were children, like Fraja's 15-month-old brother. When people tell her how lucky she was to have survived, she bristles.
Well, how lucky you were. And I say to them, gee, how lucky can I be that I had to witness the hanging of my father, the taking away of my whole family. How lucky of me to have to face all of this alone.
Norman Frajman is almost 10 years older than Frida. He was born in Warsaw in 1929. When Germany invaded Poland, his world changed too. His father was taken prisoner by the Russians and sent to Siberia. Then, the Germans forcibly moved the Jewish population in Warsaw into a ghetto, giving them just 48 hours' notice.
It was a panic that everybody was trying to get themselves some quarters where to live. And that was in the fall, and the winters are very severe in Poland. So we were fortunate enough to exchange our apartment. And literally, if I would say, we went from a castle into a chicken coop. But we were very, very happy that we could even secure that.
Death in the Warsaw Ghetto became a way of life.
People were dying of starvation. You saw faces, they were like, first of all, swollen bellies and puffed up faces, yellow of pallor. People standing on the corners begging for a handout. And there were mothers cradling infants, not wanting to part with them. These infants were not alive anymore. Believe me, this is not an exaggeration what I am telling you. This is the God's honest truth.
Then on April 19th, 1943, the Germans decided to clear the Jews out of the ghetto, burning down houses to force the citizens out.
They used gas. They pumped in gas into areas that they suspected. And that didn't help. Still people survived. So what they did is destroyed building by building by building. The ghetto was destroyed house by house.
The Jews were herded into cattle cars and shipped off to Majdanek, a camp with the reputation of being a killing factory. The morning after they arrived, people were divided into groups.
Whoever was not a typical person for slavery, they put them away aside and threw them in a lorry, never to be seen again. Then, the worst thing that happened in my life was that they separated men from women. And this was the last time that I did see my mother and sister alive.
He found out later his 12-year-old sister was killed because she became ill. His mother tried to stop the Germans and was gassed too.
And true to form, they were thrown into gas chambers, killed, thrown into the crematoria, and they were liberated. Their bodies were burned, but their ashes went through a smokestack, belching flames 24/7. And their ashes was spewed over the camp. And this is how I lost them.